In 1980, prominent businessmen and the country's intellectuals planned to overthrow President Kenneth Kaunda out of power, using senior military officers. But there's a saying, if you come for the king, you best not miss. Was Dr. Kenneth Kaunda just too powerful, or was this prompted by his authoritarianism? Or did the men want to capitalize on the falling of an economy in wanting to stage a coup d'etat? After Zambia gaining its independence in 1964, the newly sovereign nation was still surrounded by African territories that were still colonized by European powers. Zambia's liberator, President Kenneth Kaunda, was very critical about the minority and colonial rule of native Africans in the neighboring lands. And after the unilateral declaration of independence of Rhodesia in 1965, President Kenneth Kaunda would take a strong stance to help and actively support the freedom fighters as to overthrow the colonial governments of those countries. This affected Zambia's trade as it led to the closing down of the southern borders and the rise of the internal threats to the country's leadership. And the growing sectionalism in the country meant that the government was prepared to limit political opposition by force. This added on to President Kenneth Kaunda's intent to tighten his grip on power as to stabilize the nation. The humanist and idealistic leader would descend into authoritarianism. Kaunda's consolidation of power saw the formation of a one-party state in 1972.
There were several of us who voiced misgivings, and we continued to spend more, not on education, but on things like security services.
The changing of the economic world order caused the falling of the global copper prices, Zambia's main exports, which resulted to low wages, the increase in unemployment. The rise in the poverty rate in the newly independent Zambia led to corruption, mismanagement of national affairs, and food shortages. President Kenneth Kaunda would continue to support the freedom fighters of the other countries. This resulted in the bombings by the Rhodesian army on Zambian soil and the military raids on the rebel camps stationed in Zambia.
I had no choice but with a very clear conscience to accept Samora Machel as I accepted Augustino Neto, as I accepted Robert Gabriel Mugabe, as I accepted Sam Nujoma, as I accepted Oliver Tambo.
The Rhodesian war machine rolls into action, geared up for airborne strikes into neighboring Zambia.
The continued bomb attacks resulted in the imposing of curfews, the spying on citizens, and the rise of government expenditure on military services. As the leader, Kenneth Kaunda stood with a firm hand as he ruled with an iron fist. People would now be scared to voice out their opinion as the form of governance became more authoritative in a failing economy, and the very people he led to independence would cry for their own liberties. Uncontested presidential rule became somewhat of a paradox of either or, people having a disdain for Kaunda's governance, or the rise in ideology of idolizing the great leader, Kenneth Kaunda, who wielded all might without any political opposition.
Everybody seemed to think that the government of Dr. Kaunda had come to stay. They didn't know what to do. Really, there was no way in which you could change Dr. Kaunda. He did not accept advice from anybody, and only he was right. So against that, there's really no other way of changing the government except to remove him. And the removal in this case was a necessary coup d'etat.
1980, a coup d'etat was initiated by the members of the country's intellectuals and business elites. These were Zambia's upper class of the social status, who played a leading role in the post-colonial civil service and state bureaucracy, who are now disappointed and disillusioned by the state of the country by the ruling party, before and after the declaration of the one-party state.
The 1980 coup attempt was the real serious high mic, if you like, of people really getting fed up with the authoritarian government of Dr. Kaunda the spying that was going on, the wastefulness of resources, the corruption, really a combination of so many bad things going on. And a group of men, myself included, decided that we really had to do something about this.
And the men believed to be the masterminds behind the 1980 coup plot were Edward Jack Shamwana, a prominent lawyer who was a High Court commissioner, a well-educated intellectual who pioneered the admission of Africans into the legal profession in Zambia and was to be appointed as the Chief Justice, Valentine Msakanya, a renowned intellectual who served in the government as a secretary to the cabinet and head of civil service, a member of parliament, served as a government minister, and former Bank of Zambia governor from 1970 to 1972. Yoram Goodwin Mumba, a former manager for the industrial finance company and Zambia Building Society. Deogracius Simba, a businessman and politician from Zaire, a country now known as the Democratic Republic of Congo, and a lawyer by the name of Percy Anfield. And the men would meet at Edward Shamwana's home in Lusaka to lay down their plan of a coup d'etat. They hired a mercenary army from the Katanga region of Zaire, and the army would be stationed on a farm in Lusaka's Chilanga area. Allegedly, the conspirators had promised the mercenary army in assisting them in ousting President Mobutu Sese Seko out of power once President Kenneth Kaunda's government was overthrown. They had acquired 180 firearms and ammunitions. AK-47s were planned to be used, but the plotters emphasized that they didn't want to shed blood in their coup attempt. And their plan was to kidnap the Republican president, Dr. Kenneth Kaunda, and fly him to an isolated area where the conspirators would execute their bloodless coup by forcing the Republican president to resign by signing a declaration stepping down from office and handing over power at gunpoint, and then keeping President Kenneth Kaunda at his farm at Shambala Kale in Chinsali indefinitely. And the men would become the interim government. And at the House of Parliament, they would choose who was going to become the Speaker, and then go on to choose who was going to become the head of government or the Prime Minister of the Republic. Between the 1st of April and 31st of July 1980, Edward Shamwana, Valentine Msakanya, Goodwin Mumba, and Percy Anfield was said to have tried to persuade Major General Christopher Kabwe of Zambia Air Force to make arrangements in finding a suitable pilot who would deviate the presidential airplane, in which President Kenneth Kaunda would be traveling in, to an unauthorized place where the conspirators would execute their plan. And an amount of 500 kwacha was given to Major General Christopher Kabwe to coerce a suitable pilot. It was alleged that the conspirators wanted Brigadier General Godfrey Mianda of Zambia Army to organize officers and their ammunitions from the barracks. The plotters wanted some army personnel in some strategic places like the airport, oil reservoirs, and the post office, and some military personnel in the town to guard against looting and to keep order in place. And the date was set, 17th October 1980. But these wars have ears, and only if these wars could talk.
Intelligence reports were being received that there was a gang here of foreigners that was preparing to topple this government, and that this gang was hired by certain Zambian elements. Thanks to the really extremely effective and good work of our defense and security forces, thanks to the cooperation of the people, of our people, especially those in the Shibuyunji area, party militants and ordinary people there, and the whole Mumba area, we have now captured more than 40 of these people. We have since arrested some Zambians through the information that we got. And as I say, the state is very happy to prosecute both these Zambian elements as well as the foreign elements they were going to use to overthrow our government.